Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Welcome Parsons alumni, students, faculty, and guests to the program of tonight, Consciously Creative, Parsons Alumni Design for Social Impact. The Parsons alumni community never fails to impress, and it's nice to see all of you return to this year's reunion, even though we all know that one never actually leaves Parsons. My name is Auditorium, and in addition to being one of this year's Parsons Reunion Committee members, I'm also a graduate of the AAS Fashion Design Program, and I'm an ethical fashion designer with a brand of colorful and conversational women's wear that's ethically sourced, produced, and distributed. In applying my mission of investing in women along our supply chain, my team and I have launched 3 social impact programs in different countries in Africa. Most recently this summer with women of the Maasai tribe in Kenya, who we trained to hand bead our Spring/Summer 18 collection and paid them fair trade wages. Through Parsons events, I've met many generations of alumni changemakers with influence in social, political, cultural, and the artistic spheres. Tonight's panel is a group of alumni who are engaged in activating social and cultural progress through art and design. I'd like to introduce the esteemed David Van Zandt, who we're fortunate enough to have at the helm of the new school and who shares updates from the university, including all the many reasons for us to be proud members of this thriving university community. David.
Well, I hope I can live up to that, but welcome everyone to your reunion here at Parsons. It's great to see you all. I think this is one of the best days of the year. You get a chance to get reacquainted with many of your classmates. You also have a chance also to meet some new generations of creative and talented artists, designers, and professionals. And also, at this, we get to share with you ways that Parsons continues to push the boundaries and transform design thinking, design practice, and design education globally. In fact, I hope many of you come from one of our 3 sessions, which I understand we're packed and crowded. So I hope you have had a chance to experience some of what Parsons is like today. Some of you come from further back, some more recently, but Parsons and the new school are always changing, trying to get better. Thank you to our reunion and alumni committee and everybody on that for organizing this day. It's been a great job, a great day. This again is it's an opportunity for you to connect back with Parsons, and also I think as you talk to people here at the reunion, you realize how wonderful each and every Parsons alum is. Everyone is out there doing something. They're learning they're using what they learned here. Many, as we're going to hear tonight, are charting their own course. They're always challenging themselves, and I think it's a hallmark of both Parsons and New School students that they are out there engaged with society and improving the world in both expected ways and often unexpected ways. So I'll end by saying, your relationship with your alma mater, the New School in Parsons here, is a mutual one. All the achievements that you accomplished during your careers ensure Parsons continues to be the best design school in the world. We hope that we can provide you ongoing connection and resources as well as networks to advance your own careers. One thing I do want to note is, as we are living in interesting times politically, a lot of talk is out there about immigration. And I just want to reassure you, Parsons and the New School remain the most international of any major university in the United States. Parsons itself has way over 40% of its students come from outside the U.S. And I think despite the talk that's going on out there in the political realm, we are committed to welcoming each and every student, protecting their privacy, fulfilling their desire to pursue their education at what is a very creative and innovative university. So finally, I want to thank you all for being here tonight and being part of our community. Well, it's now my great pleasure to turn over the stage in the program to our Executive Dean, Joel Towers. Joel will in turn introduce the speakers, and then they will do presentations, and then he will lead them in discussion about design, how design is addressing some of the critical issues of our time. As I introduce Joel, I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the news we shared with you earlier this week. This is Joel's final academic year as dean. He has led Parsons for 9 years of incredible accomplishments and increasing strength. We are very proud and lucky, I think, that he will be continuing on as a leader at the university in a new role as university president. And he will lead the New School's efforts on the intersection of cities, climate change, and sustainable design. And I know he will continue to make a mark on the university and the world the way he has on Parsons. He will do that in ways that are exceedingly important to the university, and as we all know, on issues that are ever more urgent. So, with that done, let me turn it over to Joel. Joel, thank you.
Thank you, David. I'd like to, are we on? Can you hear me? Okay. So I'd like to echo David's comments about the incredible importance of all of our alumni, all 30,000 of them. You're not all here in the room. Some of you are on live stream, so we're going to say hello to you. And many more, I think, will be coming later on to the gathering across the street. The alumni show this year focused on very important themes around race and representation, focused under the title of underrepresented. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And I hope you're all going to join us there. But it really is a wonderful opportunity to highlight the work of our alumni when we do this panel conversation. So I'm really thrilled to have this extraordinary group here. I would just add to David's comment that the 9 years now that I have been dean have been the most extraordinary professional experience of my life. It has been amazing to work with all of our students and our faculty. Some of them are students and then they become faculty afterwards. We've got a couple of those on the panel tonight. In this particular community that is so committed to making sure that the work of Parsons is forward-looking, is addressing the challenges of our time, is identifying new spaces for art and design and business and strategy to really solve the complex problems facing society today. And that dynamic, that constant interest in finding what's new and focusing on it fearlessly and joyfully and not turning away from these challenges is what characterizes the place. And you'll hear about that tonight from several of our alumni. And it's what makes me so excited about continuing to do this work as a university professor here at the New School. So with that, I'm going to introduce very briefly a single line. We had to edit down to a single line, each of our panelists, and then they will begin with brief presentations, and then we'll get into conversation. And I'll start with Dave Carroll, because he's immediately to my right, who is a graduate from 2000. So 17 years ago, well, soon to be 18 years ago. Not that we're dating him at all. He has his Master's of Fine Arts in Design and Technology. He is an associate professor here at Parsons in the New School, focusing on data design, and his expertise is really in his recent work on the use of data in political campaigning, something we might want to pay attention to. Yeah. Next to Dave is Raquel de Anda, and Raquel has got her Master of Science degree in Design and Urban Ecologies in 2015. She's a curator, a producer, a cultural organizer, and a co-founder of the People's Climate March, dear to my heart, and a director of public engagement at No Longer Empty. Somehow my list now jumps to Grace on the other end. Grace Jun has her MFA in Design and Technology from 2016. She is the executive director of the Open Style Lab and an assistant professor of fashion here at Parsons. And then Anand and Shubham Issar, who are partners in a project and also graduated in the same class of product design from 2015 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. They are co-founders of SoaPen and UNICEF Wearables for Good Challenge winners, as well as Forbes 30 Under 30 from 2017 in the healthcare and science sector. So, this is our very distinguished panel, and we're going to begin now, I believe, with Grace. Yes?
Yeah, I think so. Other than Wi-Fi, which I think is really important. So yes, thank you for having me here. While my work and my design profession didn't start here, I think it's definitely grown. And most likely, I think being at Parsons, I was able to really get a sense of not just having a fun and excitement time, but really find what I wanted to do and be able to scale that. So again, my name is Grace. I am an MFA Design and Technology alumni, and I'm also an assistant professor here at the School of Fashion. And so a lot of my work kind of looks at how do I make socially impactful designs and work, but then take a reflection on how that can be applied for a broader or greater average. And that involved looking at how we examine the body, how I think I was trying to ask people, what does the future of health mean? What does aging or disability mean? And the whole notion of designing for people kind of gave width for designing with. So many of the times I had the privilege of kind of working always with a partner or a collaborator, and one particular person was an author as well as a curator, and she was also a breast cancer survivor. And my thesis here, while I was a graduate student, was making a garment designed with and for Dorothy to track not only her range of motion, because she faced it after surgery through paralysis, but to really look at considered uses of aesthetics and how I think fashion and design was going to alleviate self-independence and preserve dignity through dress. So as you can see, I've had a lot of trial and error. It's like mostly fitting, broken codes, trying to learn how to pattern make for the body that is always not static, but always moving. And therefore, I was trying to make a different type of wearable technology or a hybrid between fashion and tech. So while I was exploring this, I wondered, can I scale and find people that are alike? And this kind of led me after graduation to reach out to some folks other than just being in New York and Massachusetts. And there I had met with a nonprofit called Open Style Lab. And it was based as a public service project at MIT, where I spent almost all my summers and weeknights going back and forth to really examine what it means to go beyond accessibility, beyond just clothing, and kind of examining maybe medicalized equipment or clothes. So I did a lot of traveling, coming from Parsons campus and beyond. And I got to meet with many people from athletes to writers to theater, dance, that had different stories about what disability and injury or paralysis had impacted in their lives. So the goal was to make style accessible to people of all abilities, whether it might be a Paralympian to your mother who had gone through, tendinitis surgery. We looked at the body in a different way to re-examine how disability is part of our human life cycle. And so that really kind of continued my work as much as I would say as a graduate and into a full-time faculty here. So examining that, we took action, and the way we implemented some of these thoughts were attending some programs. Which you could see if the volume goes up. Thank you.
I don't want a haircut. Open Style Lab is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising awareness for accessible clothing and style. And some of the ways that we do this is to offer research as well as a 10-week intensive summer program called the Parsons School of Design. This year we have 4 clients with a disability as well as 12 fellows from diverse backgrounds, from design, occupational therapy, and engineering. So they've come all the way from the nation to join us for 10 weeks to co-create and to think about what it means to have accessible clothing, as well as looking at what an inclusive design means for the future.
When you're working with clients with disabilities, it's important to not just think about the clothing, the adaptive clothing that you're making for them, but how they're going to use that adaptive clothing
Marcy wants a jumpsuit that wraps in the front.
We realize that there are a lot of challenges regarding commuting as a wheeler, as she says. And I guess that we're going to be trying to tackle how she commutes and how we can improve that experience for her.
So this took place in the Making Center at Parsons here this summer, and I had a lot of faculty as well as supportive alumni help me with the summer program. But to really take, I think, inclusive education a bit further, I joined Parsons, and I have never left. And being here, I teach it as a collab course housed at the MFA Design and Technology program. And I bring in friends who have anywhere from multiple sclerosis to cerebral palsy for 15 weeks to kind of collaborate with students that are in product, fine arts, lighting, anywhere from fashion, and even sculpture. So to figure out how we could really make wearables or wearable technology or even just clothing accessible for people with disabilities. And so far it's been a blast. You could see in the slides that a lot of the people enjoy the process, and I hope that's kind of how we can look at re-examining what health means today for design. And therefore, I think this is a perfect topic to have for socially conscious design, and what that means is to have more diversity in the classroom. So a lot of the times I would bring in the clients with disabilities or the volunteers with therapy or physical rehabilitation background to the students, and I feel that has been probably the most meaningful to get actually an idea across to conception to then actual tangible form. It's very hard to just pretend or think you might know what dexterity or paralysis limits can be like, and therefore using different types of tools, whether it might be coding or technology or just simply pattern making or sketching, could really kind of paint us a better picture. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to discuss them after. Thank you so much.
So hi everyone, I'm Amanat.
I'm Shubham.
So we have a short little video that we would like to start by showing you all, and then I can talk a little bit more about our project. So Shubham and I and our third co-founder, Yogita, we all graduated from the product design program in 2015. And right after graduating, we were really interested in the social innovation sphere. And we found the UNICEF Wearables for Good challenge online. And this challenge outlined a number of grave problems that children around the world are facing and invited all designers, social good doers, engineers to just pick a problem and design a solution around it. So we learned a lot of scary statistics around hand washing and the infant mortality rates. And we decided to make soap fun. So we're reimagining the way kids are taught hand washing. SoaPen is a teaching tool with which kids can draw all over their hands. And when they take this drawing underwater, it lathers up and they have clean hands.
Yeah, so this video was from School. It's a special needs school in the Upper East Side. So this is kind of like the end of the 2 years that we've been working within schools. It all started in Mumbai. We entered the school, saw that low-income schools there don't really have soap in the bathrooms, and we were really confused why. And we went to the classrooms, realized that the teachers would keep that in their storage cupboards, and we asked them why, and they were like, if we put liquid soap in the bathrooms, they're going to squeeze, and waste all of it. So, and then we were like, do you understand why hand washing is important for them? They were like, yeah, we do that before the midday meal just to clean their hands before eating. And we were like, but do you understand why it's important? And they were like, no. So a lot of people don't understand that to remove germs from your hands, you actually need to wash your hands with soap. They just think that you can wash them with water and you're done. So it all started with low-income schools in Mumbai, and seeing that the placement of soap was in the bathroom, which teachers didn't like. So we wanted to kind of change the placement of soap from the bathroom to the classroom as like a teaching tool. So kids can now draw on their dry hands in the classroom. The teacher can monitor that. And
yeah, so we have 3 different colors now. It took a lot to get here. We worked with chemical engineers in Mumbai, and we're working with a factory here as well in the US. We have a Kickstarter on right now, and we're just trying to scale it up. We're figuring out the social impact. It's a teaching tool, so there's direct social impact in that. But we're dabbling between a buy one, give one model or a donation model. UNICEF is a really big partner for us on this. They've been getting interest from a lot of different countries, Vietnam as well as Africa, for a product like ours. And yeah, so we also think, we've also seen in urban populations, so there's a really big dependency on sanitizers. And this has also been an interesting learning for us, is that it actually ends up reducing a child's natural immunity. So we don't think we're going to be removing sanitizers, but just reducing that dependency. We think that's important as well.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up.
Yep.
It goes to you next.
Hi. So yeah, I'm the oldest alumni here, but it's great to see not only fellow members of the school, but even Grace, I have to admit, is a former student of mine, so really aging myself here. But the interesting thing for me is the place where I ended up right now is at once a complete accident and also just being in the right place at the right time. It began in many ways in the late 90s when I came to New York, and Parsons Design and Technology was really one of the only programs available at that time. And this was at the dawn of the internet and the dot-com boom and bust of that initial period. And I've had sort of just like Grace, came here and never left, but did spend time active in the industry, working in digital advertising and marketing, and seeing how that industry evolved over time, and to the place where we are today, where we are seriously wondering and questioning about the role that social media and our use of data and how it's affecting even our democracy is being reconsidered now. Every day the headlines are more and more unbelievable. And it was just my experience here at Parsons and working in an industry and seeing how the sausage is made, so to speak, put me in place to understand perhaps how the use of data for political purposes is different than it used to be. And I met a Swiss data science researcher shortly after the election who urged me to request my data from a strange company called Cambridge Analytica. And we had a hypothesis that if the request was denied, then it would mean our data stayed in the United States, because there's no law in the United States that a company has to give you their data on you if you ask for it. But the company did reply with the information. So we asked for it in February, and then we received it in March. And I posted the data to Twitter, and it generated some interesting attention. And a lawyer in England wanted to become my solicitor because there was an understanding of what was supplied that it was actually not even legal to British law. And so we have ever since been working on bringing a lawsuit against the company, but not here in the United States, in London. And it's great that there's a Kickstarter that you have to contribute to on this panel. And there's also what's called a Crowd Justice Fund, which I am running now to raise money to take the case to court. I'm a group of people who requested our data, and we have our lawyer and some of the top barristers in England who basically want to help us, in a sense, repatriate our data back from the United Kingdom. It's inappropriate and wrong that it left the country. We are trying to get the company that collected the data to delete it and stop collecting for future elections, because the company is actually a military contractor and does work around the world in very disturbing ways for using data and marketing and advertising technologies to actually divide and foment ethnic and political discord. So it is potentially an important precedent to set to recapture control of our own data and rethink the role of data in the political process. So no matter what happens, it's going to be really interesting. I have never done a lawsuit before, and so I think that's one of the spirits of being a Parsons alum, is you never stop learning, never stop trying new things. So not just do a lawsuit, but don't even do it in your own country. So wish me luck and contribute to the campaign, and hopefully we'll get our data back.
Good luck. Hello. So is this extra loud?
No.
Or is it? It's just me. Okay. My name is Raquel, and I am my practice sits at the intersection of curating and activism. And I don't think that I really need to sell any of you guys in this room on the fact that we're currently living in a really scary moment where we're witnessing so many overlapping crises happening in our country. From the climate chaos that we saw just ransack Puerto Rico, Houston, and so many other places, to anti-immigrant ideas and police violence. It just feels like it's happening all around us. And what I have been trying to do and question in my own practice as a curator, as a producer, is trying to figure out how creative strategy can be used to challenge narratives that are in the popular dominant culture, to potentially push forward new policy and really transform the landscape around us. So what I'd like to do is speak to you guys just really briefly about 5 different approaches that I've used in my own practice throughout the years. So a few years ago, as Joel mentioned, I was one of the lead organizers on the People's Climate March, and I was working in Bushwick in a 7,000 square building, which is huge by New York City standards. We basically transformed this space into a space for all sorts of different artists to come together and think about how they were going to tell the story of what the new climate justice movement was. A movement that was really changing the conversation from one of polar bears and melting glaciers to one about frontline communities and people that were very much affected by this and already witnessing the effects of climate change in their backyard, right? So because there were so many voices that we wanted to make sure were part of this story, we realized that the best way to do this was to tell a giant story through this mass mobilization of what ended up being 400,000 people on the streets of New York City. So by creating a narrative for the march, people could then say, rather than saying, oh, meet me on 87th Street, they would then say, we're part of the labor with the We Build the Future contingent, or we're marching with the indigenous group at the front lines of crisis are the forefronts of change. So it's really a strategy for us to think about not only where to give people a place to sit in this larger movement and to continue to have a stake in moving forward, but also a media strategy, right? Because the media themselves could then begin to tell these stories on a much larger level. So, you know, this was a really great way where we could integrate people who hadn't necessarily thought about how climate connected to their work. People like folks that were organizing in the Rockaways around housing could see how climate connected to their housing work, or immigrants who before were really working around specific issues related to immigration and immigration reform could start to connect the crises of the idea of like climate refugees, right? And the fact that extreme droughts and flooding across the world is actually going to continue to escalate issues of immigration. So we need to actually create and think about what a comprehensive immigration reform looks like. So what we really appreciated about this moment was starting to tease together all of these narratives and create a much larger intersectional story about what this climate justice movement was. I'm a curator. I've been working in the curatorial world for many years, and I love the galleries, museums, and alternative art spaces as places for institutional platforms, right? Places where we can bring people together, have very nuanced, difficult conversations, and incubate ideas. So I'm just going to flip through a couple different slides that talk to some of these different places where I've curated exhibitions. In Project Row Houses in Houston, Texas, I developed an exhibition called Shattering the Concrete: Artists, Activists, and Instigators. Artists were approaching different themes from prison reform to climate justice to police brutality, housing rights, and all looking at different ways to see how we can bring different experts to the table with really culture and arts as like a big catalyzing force behind the work. This is an image of People's Paper Co-op, which is an organization based in Philly that brings together artists, policy experts, and lawyers to clear people's criminal records. This is an exhibition at Washington Projects for the Arts, which was also dealing with climate, but really looking at artists who are working in the space of the studio, because the work isn't always out on the streets. It was interactive, it had all sorts of different pieces in it. And another exhibition of socially engaged art at the Art Museum of the Americas, working both hyperlocally in DC, but also bringing together artists from across the world that are looking at these themes of socially engaged art practice. So really looking to see how these institutional platforms can serve as spaces of education to really strengthen our practice. One of the organizations that I've been working with locally in New York City is naturally occurring cultural districts. And naturally occurring cultural districts believes that culture doesn't just reside in the districts that cities claim the art districts, but they actually reside in all sorts of corners and neighborhoods in New York City. And over the course of the last 2 years, one of the things that we organized was a decentralized process across New York City's NYCHA housing to collect data from residents living in NYCHA, asking them what kind of arts infrastructure they wanted to see more of in their neighborhood. We had hundreds of all sorts of different meetings and gatherings that had culture at the heart of them, right? So we used anywhere from like Theater of the Oppressed to story circles and all sorts of different means to really get people to talk and envision what they wanted to see in their neighborhood. We put together a report, presented it to the city, and these themes were actually then integrated into New York City's cultural plan. And I think it's super important to think about ways we can redistribute resources. When the ban dropped, the first immigrant ban dropped, I got together with my friend and collaborator Sonia Guiñasaka, and we were able to secure some funding from some foundations, and we used that as seed grants for artists that were developing work around immigration all across the city and also in Texas as well. And some of these little small grants of $500, it's impressive how that can just really catapult an idea. The Asian American Writers Workshop put together this bona fide relationships portfolio, which was playing on the theme of bona fide relationships, which is what the administration named people had to claim in order to enter the country, which was really just this like vague and arbitrary term. So they had all these different people who were from those countries write stories, essays, and poems reflecting on what a bona fide relationship could be. Cynthia Briones is documenting a life lived in sanctuary by a few different families in New York City who are currently living in churches because ICE has asked them to return to Federal Plaza with tickets back to Central America. So rather than reporting to ICE, these families have chosen to live in sanctuary. These are things that are happening right in our city, right? And in Texas, an extremely racist anti-immigrant law, SB 4, was going to be passed. And we funded in a variety of cities across Texas a series of light brigade actions, which really just catapulted a lot of different actions on the street, brought people together around this theme. And the last thing I want to speak about really quickly is something that I'm organizing in New Orleans next year during the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, which is funded by Shell. New Orleans is one of the many hotbeds of severe climate injustice, and what we are organizing there is a 3-day gathering of artists to start to envision a way in which arts and culture can disentangle ourselves from the fossil fuel industry. Because by accepting funds from the fossil fuel industry, we are essentially giving them a social license to operate. And fossil fuel industries are very much putting our entire livelihood of our society and our planet at stake. So this is the beginning of a 3-day discussion, a series of billboards across New Orleans, publication, and an exhibition that will start to really imagine what a world separated from the fossil fuel industry could look like.
So I have the enviable or unenviable task of trying to constrain a conversation to a short period of time so that we can get to some of your questions. And we could probably talk all afternoon and evening, which I would love to do, and maybe we'll continue that afterwards. But I'm really struck by something that happened across the presentations and across your work that I'd love you to reflect on. And that is, this panel represents about 16 years of different curricular engagements, right? Starting with Dave on this end, and Raquel is the most recent grad from the program here at Parsons. And across the work, there is a way in which you are each taking your practice and directing it toward these really critical and important issues that exist in the world around us. And I'm curious if there's anything we did when you were here that encouraged that to happen. In other words, is there a way, when you think back to the early days of design and technology, all the way through the various programs that are represented here, because I don't know another design school, and I know a lot of them, that is, everybody's trying to figure out how to work in the public realm. That's not new, right? I don't want to pretend that we're some kind of exception in that regard. But the ability to really focus your work and look out and be creative and joyful and just totally focused on finding these kinds of solutions feels to me like something it's so interesting that it spans these 16 years. And so I'm curious, when you reflect back on your time at Parsons, if there was a way in which you came in thinking one thing and maybe it sort of developed, or you brought it here and it evolved further, but how did it happen? Was it something in the water? I don't know, who wants to go first?
I can speak to that a little bit. With Designing Urban Ecologies, I was the second cohort that went through the program. And so as a second cohort, I thought, well, the first year will be the real guinea pigs. But I think we were still the guinea pigs at that point.
We're all still, 122 years in, we're all still guinea pigs.
True. Although what I really appreciated about the program, which is why I actually came to the program after a 9-year hiatus, right? I'd had a practice as a curator before then. But part of what I loved about the program, and I think what really has seeped into my practice, is it's the interdisciplinary approach, right? I was the only person in the room in a group of 12 that had an arts, like a curatorial practice, I should say. There was an urban planner in the room, there was an economist, there was somebody who'd studied like peace and justice, right? So there were all these different people coming together, and it really challenged us to think about different ways in which power works in cities, right? And the ways in which all of our different assets can come together to try and transform that. So I would say for me, that was really something that has continued to influence my work, really, as I start to see the arts influencing policy. How are all of these different actors coming together in order to really create a different view of what's happening?
I can go. I think a lot of it for us was product design, you're focusing a lot on an object, but we were always taught to look beyond that, see the community that you're entering. Are you disrupting, to not disrupt, but to fit? I think that was what we took a lot from. When we went to schools, we were looking at what the children were already doing. So they like drawing on their hands. So, incorporate that into the product. And then one more thing was collaboration. Everybody hated group projects, but it taught us to actually reach out to people who had skills that we didn't. That is, chemical engineers. We aren't soap makers, we're designers. So those two things definitely.
I heard the class of 2017 laughing about collaboration. We'll ask about that in a second. Yeah.
I'll just reiterate the ideas of interdisciplinarity and collaboration and the role of the designer. Galvanizes I think the unique thing for me in the sense of understanding the role of the designer. You need to break down the boundaries of other disciplines. It's part of your job to connect across these industries and businesses and sectors that don't even talk outside of themselves. And so you realize that you're welcome in places as a designer because you're a needed role in society, because everything does get designed and people are waiting for somebody to do it.
Well, I guess for me, I came 5 years outside of the tech industry, so working in a profession and then coming back to school was kind of a big change. But being at Parsons, I think it really excavated a lot of the deep things that I wanted to explore, and it was really the questions from the faculty and the students kind of really getting at, if you want to go expand and make social impact or save the world, what is it that you want to do first, and how are you re-examining yourself and being reflective? So I would say that was probably the biggest impact I had being here for 2 years, and allowing that fluidity to take me to take pattern courses at the School of Fashion, to exploring product designers across the street. So it would definitely echo a lot of those traits too.
So something about the kind of personal piece of it, it's really interesting, Grace, because I think there's something so deeply genuine about all the work that's being presented here tonight. And I think being able to connect into your personal, what really motivates you, but then to direct that activity externally as well to try to solve some complex problem. And it's true, we do a lot of collaborative work. For those of you that are coming back to Parsons from maybe the 70s or the 60s, or we have some folks from the 50s as well coming back. I don't know that we were necessarily that collaborative back then, but there's a strong emphasis. Sometimes what we hear, this is why 2017 was laughing, sometimes you hear every project is a collaboration. But it's really interesting, I think, this challenge to figure out how the role of design in the world is inherently collaborative, as Dave puts it so eloquently, and the interdisciplinarity, which is essentially a new school story, right? Because that's the thing that makes, I would argue, Parsons so interesting, is that dynamic, that kind of the social, we are surrounded, if you will, by the social, right? The new school's original social research name, if you will, and then how that relationship to design. Were you, as you were here as students, and I think more recently, Dave probably more, and Grace as faculty, how that dynamic within the university also altered your experience?
So you want to talk about 17 years or 2 years?
It's up to you, Grace. You're on the panel.
I think definitely it translated, and it made me more reassured why I was here in the first place. Leaving, I think, the job that I did, and leaving actually a country to even come back to be here in New York, and being here at Parsons took a lot of risk on my part. So finding a community like this right after grad school and continuing the relationships that I so coincidentally went all the way to Massachusetts and brought in, and from anywhere from Connecticut to also bring into New York, was, I think, a lot of that richness from faculty work, as well as just their encouragement. Because many of them were really loving what they do, and they weren't afraid to tell me the things that they couldn't do, or they maybe had mistakes in doing. So a lot of that, I think transparency was great, even kind of carrying it forward.
All right, so I've got 2 more questions for the panel, and then I want that to be a kind of prompt to all of you, because in about 5-10 minutes, I'm going to ask if you have some questions, and I'm sure you do. But I'm curious, as you are all deeply embedded in this work, what's next for you? What's the thing that's on the horizon? If you can think about what that is. And I wouldn't be doing the job of dean if I didn't tell you need to contribute to their causes. We got Kickstarter, we got what was it, Dave?
Crowd Justice.
Crowd Justice. Anyway, sorry, just a little brief moment there. What is next? What do you think is next for you?
Goes first.
I mean, I can answer.
So
I spoke a little bit about Fossil Free Fest, which is a big next for me. I'm co-curating that with 2 women from New Orleans, Imani Jacqueline Brown and Monique Verdine. So we're currently fundraising and looking at really building that out. And it's complicated, you know, how do we name our complicity in this situation, our entanglement with the fossil fuel industry? How do we actually begin to rip ourselves away from that? And they're very difficult conversations, and I'm really looking forward to using the arts as a way to name that and to start to just work it out together. I also just recently began a position, as you mentioned earlier in my bio, as the director of public engagement at an arts organization named No Longer Empty, which activates underutilized spaces across New York City. So I'm really excited about that. We're collaborating with the Queens Museum on a retrospective that they're doing of artist Mel Chen's work. So as part of No Longer Empty, we will be activating many site-specific works across the city of New York. So I'm not at liberty to speak about them yet, but they will be public very soon.
Yeah, I think for us, we're still focusing on how to get SoaPen out there, looking for other partnerships that we could use to, you know, grow the business, get it out to more children, definitely. I think, but generally, we're still all interested in social impact. Being designers, we want to be able to design other products for other solutions that might be needed in the same sphere. We're also a part of a design residency where we're starting to dabble into that a little bit right now. And this residency that we're in is about a residency dedicated towards social impact. So we're working with 4 other companies or 5 other companies and individuals within different fields of design, and we're trying to find a new way to come up with something new for impact. Yeah.
I think kind of the same story, but also scaling is big for us right now. Getting into systems, maybe public schools, private schools, and that's hard in every country, so figuring out the rules around that. But most importantly, creating more partnerships across all kinds of fields.
We're going to have to get you out of jail someplace?
I hope not. No, I'm not doing anything wrong. What I'm doing is quite bureaucratic. It's just so fascinating. But yeah, I think I've got like 5,000 pounds more to go on our crowd justice campaign. And when we do, then our lawyer files suit. And then we get the defense. And then in England, it's amazing. The judge actually sets a maximum cost for the case. And then we'll raise more money for that, because we know how much it will cost to do that. And then what we will probably figure out is, can we make contributions to the investigations in Washington, D.C. and in London related to the controversies surrounding the elections at the most. And at the minimum, we will figure out how to protect our data as it flows across geographic and political boundaries.
So once it's repatriated, how do we get it back?
Well, that would be the idea, is we figure out a way to make it easy for people to get their data back by going through this process.
All right. You and I need to talk after.
Yeah.
I guess mine's a little less bureaucratic, but it's a lot about reclaiming, I think, health and what healthcare means today. So a lot of my work right now is trying to raise funds. If you look at the Kind Cause Foundation, we're trying to raise $10,000 for next year's summer with different clients with different abilities and students to participate. And challenging foundations that you don't need to donate for solving cancer in the next 10 years of research, but you can donate today to solve the lack of accessible apparel and the kind of gap between medical devices and assistive tech that's not offered even through Medicare or Medicaid. So that I feel is kind of my challenge, or my call to challenge for the next 5 years.
Okay, so this is my last question for you, and then we're going to go to the audience. And this is sort of, in order for you to help us as alumni and to help Amy and the entire alumni team, I mentioned there are 30,000 some alumni out there, and they're not all actually on this live stream. And some of them are here. What's the design solution that gets all 30,000 of them involved? You can think about it for about 2 seconds, and then we need some answers. They're not going to have them. Well, and anybody out here has an answer too, because we're going to crowdsource it. What is that? Okay, so we need, because in some ways, right, it's that cross-generational experiences that so many people have had with the school. And the thing that I'm amazed by is really this social commitment. I actually think we have to stop running panels that are about social commitment, because so much of the work across the entire school is already there. Naming it that way in some ways diminishes the fact that design itself has moved into a sphere in which, if it is responsive to humans and to the planet, that it is already socially responsible. And anything that isn't, I mean, there's bad design out there, but we don't teach that at Parsons. So I really do think it's, in some ways, it's almost redundant at this point to be speaking about it. Did I give you enough time to figure out how we're going to get 30,000 people involved? Or were you actually listening to what I was saying and not thinking? Because that's what you're supposed to do as a moderator, is give you the time.
I think we'd have to provide a video or a sketch to show what kind of design I think really is going to make that impact, because we can't talk about it here, obviously.
Yeah, get us a sketchbook, Joel.
I'm sketching. I have my alumni sketchbook. You have these today, right? Didn't everyone get that? I don't know. Amy gave me one of these that says alumni on it. So. Okay, who's got some questions that we can take in the audience? There are a couple of microphones that we can pass around. David is offering to help. Thank you, David.
It's tough to get out of the seats sometimes.
On anything, yes. We can talk about Scott Pruitt if you'd like. I'm sure Raquel would like to do that.
Here we go. Got one down. Oh, well, you're number 2.
Hi. My name is Mir Musa. I'm a graduate from Parsons 1999, Communication Design. Nice to see everyone, and the panelists, thank you for your presentation. I have a question for Raquel and Anand. And I'm an artist now, and I was wondering how do I or anybody else could contribute to your future program?
To my future program?
Like to what you mentioned.
The Fossil Free Fest?
Yeah, or the other one.
Or the Climate March?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the Climate March happened in 2014, and then again last year in DC. And I believe it's the People's Climate Movement. It's an online site that you can connect with and see what's happening. There's also Facebook pages and a community that you can connect with there. If you're interested in Fossil Free Fest, you should find me after the gathering. We also have a Facebook page. And as I said, we're going to have a series of conversations around issues like complicity, equity, strategizing, or visioning and action. So if you're interested in coming to those, you're welcome to join in New Orleans. We have an open call for the exhibition, which is based on solutions, and a billboard project that I can talk to you about as well. So we're online, and I'm happy to talk to you if you're interested, if you have specific questions in terms of how you as an artist want to contribute.
We have one over here.
Hi, my name is Maggie Cavalier, and I am part of the class of 2017. Yep, just happened. Still fresh. I feel like I'm in class. So I guess I have a question based off of what Joel was just talking about, meaning, we meet amazing people and friends when we're at Parsons, and what role has your Parsons community played throughout your lives?
I mean, for us, we're business partners now, so we're very closely knit still.
Yeah.
Our major was also really small. Product design is pretty small, or our year was pretty small, so a lot of people are still here in New York. We meet actively. Yeah.
I live with one. I live with one of my graduate, classmates, and she and I talk about design and technology in our time here, so that's one.
I was, a couple years ago, I was working on a project that had a very short timeline to be produced for the Tribeca Film Festival, for the Interactive Film Festival, and we really needed this one kind of designer, and we had no idea where to get them, and I'd already graduated at this point. And so I just photocopied a bunch of, just a flyer with our phone number saying exactly what we needed. I think the headline was like, want to be part of the Tribeca Film Festival? Searching for creative designers. And we put it up in as many places as we could. And we ended up getting these really great calls from design and tech. So I think for me, it's, and then also I have folks that I graduated with that I call on often that are designers. Because we were interdisciplinary, I wasn't really great at making maps on GIS, but other people were. So being able to just call on that community and friends now has been really helpful.
I'm trying to think in the past 20 years if I have not worked with anyone who has been a part of the community. Because even when I was working in business, at the companies that I was at, there were other alumni who were other employees, or when I tried to be an entrepreneur, hired people from Parsons. So I don't even know what it's like to not be part of the community.
We're going to take up a fund to send Dave out into the world, just so he knows what he's not missing.
Yeah, right.
Other questions, please. Down here.
It seems each of you is kind of intertwining one field of hard science and passion for society well-being to regenerate true wealth for our communities. What results from your projects would you extrapolate to show how profitable it is to nurture positive externalities?
Wow, that's a deep question. But I think I heard fashion in there somewhere and sciences, right? Yeah, okay. So, if I could remember, your last statement was to ask if...
what can you extrapolate, what results you can extrapolate from your projects to show how profitable it is to nurture positive externalities that are not currently accounted in our economic system.
Profitable, not necessarily financially.
Right.
So I guess profitable and positive experiences would go hand in hand. For each person that we work with a disability, we end up giving the project to them. And the students not only have it for their portfolio, but they're also contributing to, I think, a lack of design product or service that's not out there. So it's my job then around December, Christmas, and Hanukkah to be like, hey, how's that coat doing? Or how is that device that we made you last spring doing? And kind of checking up. That, in turn, is kind of what other companies do anyway for, I think, product assessment and consumer value. So in my sense, that kind of looks at how we value and how we kind of analyze what worked and didn't work to improve. And so we do that in the classroom today, and we also do it at the organization, which is housed here at Parsons.
Yeah, I think for us it's a little bit more direct. At the end of a hygiene awareness or SoaPen demo that we do in a classroom, having kids come up to us after asking for more or wanting to use the product more, really saying that, oh, they didn't know that there were so many steps related to hand washing. That for us is like a direct way of saying that, oh, this was something that they were unaware of prior to
I think also
using our
this
product.
recent visit to the special needs school was really amazing for us because the teachers came up to us after because they have such a hard time in teaching children how to wash their hands because especially in a special needs school, they don't like to be touched very much. And introducing a fun aspect to hand washing or hygiene in general was very impactful. And that, in the essence, is more our profit than anything.
It's hard to measure sometimes what the actual effects are. But I would say right after the climate march, there were, and still today, we're seeing in news articles a lot of the different headlines that we gave for the march, like "the debate is over," being used as titles in ways that people are talking about the climate justice movement and climate change and what we're doing. We can build the future. There are like certain things that we see and we're like, I don't know if they even realized they got it from there, but they probably did. And you can't like draw a direct connection to it, but there are these things that you see and that you think might have a connection. There was also a direct connection between the climate march and the Paris Accord and the agreements that were signed at COP21 the following year, right? I mean, the world is a mess since then, but still, right, there can be connections drawn between work that you're doing on the ground with artists and then policy changes. The NOCD Creative Transformation Report around public housing is also something that ended up in the cultural plan. So, you know, I think for me, it's really just figuring out ways in which you can really shape the world around you and not necessarily always see very concrete results, but just sort of hope and trust that it is going towards a greater goal.
And I would say my project is actually dealing with the consequences of externalities, the unintended consequences of, you know, using all the data that we generate as a consumer, every credit card swipe, every website visited, every television show watched, and then that get reattached to our voter registration files in another country and used against people without their knowledge. It's actually absolutely about addressing the externality of not having security in this regard. And so it's about finding what could be called cognitive security. That is, like, if you protect your privacy, then you can protect your cognitive security in this new crazy world.
And I'll just add one answer from myself on that one, because your question is so important. These projects all understand that we live in a system, and in fact on a planet, that there is no external to. In fact, there's no there outside of it. So the whole notion that there's an external, that is where we put waste, or where we house data, or we do any of the, what this group is doing is redefining what it means to produce design that has value and the measures by which we address that. So you can't make beautiful design that produces an externality because you're not taking into account the system. And so it's a complete rethink of the very notion, which is an economic notion, not one that is ecological, which in itself, of course, is a contradiction, right? Because the root of economics and ecology are shared in their meaning. So,
other questions? One up here.
Good afternoon. One of the things that you've all been very successful at is getting funding. Design requires money. Do you guys have any strategies for getting funding outside of crowdfunding websites that don't require you to, sacrifice your morals, basically?
We were really lucky. We had a UNICEF grant, right, and then 2 rounds of that funding. But I think grants are a great way because they call for ideas and they reward your ideas, and you're not selling your soul for that. And
yeah, there's plenty of design challenges, I think, more now than I remember seeing while I was at school. Yeah. I think even within the university, there's so many competitions always happening. And once you kind of get into the rhythm of that, I think that's a good way to be able to fund some of the projects.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think mine is a mix of 2 things. Maybe keeping in contact with your professional networks, because they've really broadened me some sponsorships and connections that way, because they're people I trust. And 2, get good at grant writing, because you might not look at design grants, but and I'm pretty sure your concept or your ideas and passions will touch other disciplines. If you look at the other disciplines and what kind of funding that's available there, it becomes more of an interesting story.
And in the case of being an entrepreneur, I think the role of the designer is increasingly respected by the investor class. And so therefore, being more audacious than you might have been because, oh, I'm not a computer scientist or an engineer, or I'm not this or that. Like the role of the designer is recognized in a broader, more expansive identity for the people who are investing in companies and things.
I mean, I don't think I have anything outstanding to add to that. We've really been working within the world of philanthropy, so from grants, arts-based grants, city-based grants, which you just have to like continue trying and talk to a lot of people. And we were fortunate enough to get a couple. I was a Rauschenberg Artists Activist Fellow, which then connected me to a whole other group of funders. So that is a privilege that I don't think many people have. But there's a ton of grants, and one thing that we've actually been looking at specifically with this last Fossil Free Fest is thinking about banks as funders, but good banks, right? Banks that are actually investing in a healthy world, not banks that are investing in pipelines. So that's actually one stream that we're beginning to investigate in our own work, and yeah, thinking about different investors, individuals and whatnot.
So the only thing I'll add to your question, and then we're going to actually wrap up this portion of the evening, because I've also done some fundraising in these years, is that the thing that is most successful and allows you, in my opinion, to really maintain the integrity of what you're doing is when you're fundraising for something that is an extraordinary cause. It makes something better in the world, as all of these projects have demonstrated. And when that cause is Parsons, and its students and our facilities that make it possible to bring the best students from anywhere in the world here, that's just a story that if you tell, people want to help you with. And so I think if you're traveling on a path with a heart, as Castaneda used to say, that is the best way to convince people that what you're doing and what their ambitions are aligned, and you can change the world with that. And so that's the best advice I could give you, whether it's in grants or in other places. And with that, I'd like to introduce to you somebody who you already know, but is going to say a few words at our closing, who did this work because she followed her own heart. And that's the chair of our Board of Governors and a Parsons alum, Kay Unger.
Well, one of the benefits of being here and sort of being the last of this amazing seminar or panel is I get to ask my own question. So I'm going to step over here so I can see you a little. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Because I'm so involved in Parsons, and I'll backtrack a little after I ask this question, is what didn't you learn here? I really seriously want to ask that, because each of you are very successful in your own way. You're part of our mission, certainly Joel's, mine, everybody here, about social good, making an impact. You're going to leave a legacy. But what didn't we teach you that we need to know about that might help you? One of the questions asked was, how do you do funding? Mm-hmm. If you could each just say one thing that we might want to go back and bring into the curriculum or do some special seminars with the alumni, what didn't you learn? Grace?
What are you teaching that you didn't learn?
Yes, I think what I didn't learn here, it's definitely how to say no. That's one thing. I became too involved with everyone else's work and trying to gravitate to a more social or community-based driven mission. But I think sometimes maybe, I don't know if it's a course or it's kind of an alumni gathering like today, but to kind of hone back into your individuality, which is what I do in the classroom anyway, when we work so closely with our clients with disabilities, as what does independence mean to you? What does individual style or voice mean to you? So that kind of alone time, which I feel we're always juggling as students, was probably what I wish I had more.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one, but I think I've gone back and forth with this in my mind a couple of times, is that if we should have had maybe more of a business course or something. Sometimes I think that it's not needed because it might alter the way you think about design or your solution. But sometimes I do think, like you said, the role of a designer is so much more respected higher up now, that maybe that could have been something beneficial for us.
Yeah, I think I do that every day too.
Yeah.
Business a little more, how to do my taxes, but I learned. You know, like what happens as a freelancer when you get out, you know, like all those things, you know, you have to do your taxes even if you're an international. So little things like that, but you learn, and you taught us to be good collaborators, so we learn from other people.
Raquel?
You know, it's a really tough question. I think if given more time, I'm going to come up with a better answer for you, and I will email it to you. Oh. But the first thing that comes to mind is just the question that this gentleman posed really is about fundraising and how to do it in a way that's ethical, right? Yeah. We're really, with this latest gathering that we're bringing together, it's like, how do we get money from good organizations, right? How do we do it? 350.org actually has a really great list of foundations that have divested, but thinking about that and having more preparation, I think would have been super beneficial for me.
David?
I think it might be how to do democracy. That is like how to contact representatives at different levels for different issues, and how to write to them, and how to meet with them and persuade them, and how to engage in policy making more directly.
Well,
Okay,
first of all,
let me add one, because I think listening to the panel and looking to a bunch of design and management graduates over there, all who have business degrees, I think one of the things that I'm learning is that no matter how much intersectionality and crossover we produce and try to structure into our curriculum, it's not enough, because we have to do more of it, because we actually have these capacities both within Parsons and across the university, and that work is so important to the success of, you know, when I talk about Parsons, it's the designers, it's the artists, but it's also the business leaders and the strategists, and these things are all connected. And so, note to self.
So this is my opportunity, now that I've learned all your names as well, one, to thank this panel. You were absolutely incredible. So I want to give you all a big hand. And I like that it has this 17-year span. So as many of the people here know, I add to that by, I graduated here 50 years ago. So, but I feel what's so interesting and what I love about being chairman of the board of Parsons and a trustee of the New School and an alum, and those who are watching us and those of you here, and I think there's some students here as well. Bringing each of you back together is so important. You talk about collaboration. When I went to Parsons, we didn't collaborate. We kind of fought with each other. We wanted to cut their projects. I was in fashion. You know, the kids were really great and accurate at night, you know. It was so much competition. Maybe that still exists, but I am, as I call and I have coined, #Parsons Proud. We have a heart and a soul now, and I think what you're doing is so incredible, and I know so many out here are doing the same. So one of the things that I could also ask another question, but we're going to be able to go next door to the other side where the Sheila Johnson Center, be able to talk to each other more, is to get more alumni together. And our new alumni, like Maggie and her friends, I try and talk to each and every one, but we have to talk to each other. I have an amazing board. The Parsons Board of Governors is incredible. We want to help you. We really do. You have to show us how. So whether it's politically, we all want to make changes. It's an amazing group of people who raise money, who invest. We help support the school. And we need all of you to, one, ask us for our help. Show us how to help you. And I know that we will learn. I learn here every day. I say that when things get sort of piled on my shoulders, what do? I come to classes. It's the way I clear my head. And I will say for you alumni who maybe haven't been in here in a while or haven't walked around, one, you've got to walk around. I hope you all feel, I know Grace does, have the facilities helped? And Dave, you were here 17 years ago. This is not the school you went to. Is it helping? Is it helping having that space? I was lucky enough to participate to help build the Making Center. I see so many students and faculty. I even brought my grandchildren there. When I talk to them on FaceTime, they say, Glammy, show us the pottery we made. And I have to take it and show them what they did downstairs at the Making Center. But anyway, it's not about me, it's about all of you. And we really do. One of our biggest goals, and I have fabulous people on our board, and Dee McDonald-Miller, who you will probably see there later, who works on alumni engagement, and Amy, and all the people who helped with this reunion. I just want to say, one, thank you, and keep in touch. What did you all say? It's collaboration and reaching out. And it's hard out there. And there's so many tools, so let's help each other build it. And then let's go drink across the street and have a lot of fun. Thank you.